Welcome back to Your Anxiety Toolkit. Today, we're going to cover a topic that I think everyone with anxiety experiences at some point in time, and that is procrastination. Today, we're going to go through the 6 reasons that you might be procrastinating so that you can make a plan and hopefully end that procrastination so you can get back to doing the things you want to do. So let's go. Recognizing the reasons that you procrastinate is so important. I want to make sure I cover one key point before we get into the 6 reasons, and that is you're not lazy. You're not faulted. It's not a bad personality trait that you procrastinate. And so I want to dispel that myth right out of the gate so that we can beat the self-criticism and the self-judgment and the self-punishment that you may be doing or have done in the past. The fact that you procrastinate does not mean that there's anything wrong with you. You're not broken. These are patterns and safety behaviors that we engage in to manage distress in our body. Procrastination is a behavior, often we would call it an avoidant behavior, we do to avoid having to be really uncomfortable and to work through the deep stuff that's going on in our brain and in our mind and in our body. So I wanted to first, again, go over this is not a fault of yours. You're not bad because you do this. In fact, I'm even going to reframe a couple of those things here in a second. As we go to talk about the reasons why you procrastinate, I want to first just tell you a story that changed the way I thought about procrastination. When I was an intern and I had a supervisor when I was first becoming a therapist, you're an intern and you have a supervisor who supervises you in all your cases. And a lot of the interns were talking about how we were so behind on all of our research and our study, and we had all these tests and we had all these assignments and we had to see clients. And she questioned us by saying, procrastination isn't necessarily a problem. First, you've got to look at the function of the procrastination. So what she said was, if procrastination is working for you and it means you do get the work done and you complete it in time and you're happy with the product that you've created, procrastination isn't actually a problem. I think in our society, we tell ourselves that we should be so organized and we should be so calm handing in the assignment instead of pressing the button right at the very last minute or sliding into work right as you're supposed to start. Now, she said if it's working for you, go ahead and keep doing it. But so many of you, particularly those with anxiety, say, no, Kimberly, that's not the case. It is not working for me. And if that's the case for you, let's first look at the effects of procrastination. If you're somebody who has an extreme amount of anxiety when you procrastinate, it's coming from a place of anxiety. It increases your panic. It increases your stress. At the last minute, you kind of melt down. Well, then this is why we want to explore the causes and the reasons why you procrastinate so that we can come up with a solution and a strategy that does help you. So let's get going. Okay, so now let's talk about the 6 reasons we procrastinate. Number 1 is the fear of failure. I think this is true for so many people. Because we're so afraid of making a mistake, our society has become allergic to making mistakes and failures. And so we create such a story in our head about how it's going to be so bad if we fail, and it's going to be so bad if it doesn't go right, and how we're going to look stupid and how we're going to feel terrible. But a lot of that is coming from this entrenched belief that we're not supposed to fail. And I have learned, in fact, I did a whole podcast about this where I took a whole year and I practiced failing for a whole year. I tried to fail 100 times and it completely changed my way of thinking about failure. In everything I do, the reason I get really good at things is because I failed over and over and over again. And I changed the way I looked at failure. Now, I understand in today's society, we are expected to perform at such a high level. But what I want to have you do is think about instead acting from a place of a B minus. What I mean by that is instead of going for an A plus all the time, try going for a B minus. You will find that if you just drop the bar and let it be imperfect, you will have so much less anxiety. And if you can practice being gentle and kind with yourself when you do mess up or you do fail, it is so much easier. I've had so many patients and students tell me it's not actually failing that's the problem. It's the beat up I give myself when I fail that I'm not wanting to do and I'm not wanting to experience. That's why I avoid it. I don't want to beat myself up if I fail. Okay, so we want to really make sure we change the way we look at failure. The second reason we procrastinate is because we don't want to be uncomfortable. This could cover all of these categories, to be honest, because all of the reasons we procrastinate, ultimately, as I said before, we're just trying to avoid discomfort. So many times I procrastinate recording this episode of Your Anxiety Toolkit, or I avoid and procrastinate working out, isn't because I don't want to do those things. I really love making these videos. I really love to get exercise. But what I do is I'm avoiding that uncomfortable feeling that I have to do. I'm ultimately avoiding the hard work stage of any product or anything that we do. So much of the positive things in our lives, the things that actually bring us fulfillment, require hard work. And nobody likes hard work. It's not that fun. It's uncomfortable. And we as a human species, or any species, loves to avoid discomfort. We do what we can to cut corners. And procrastination is one of those things. Often we're scrolling on Instagram, we're checking our email because we want to avoid having to propel ourselves into doing the hard thing. Now, the tip for this is to break things down into small, easy steps, small, doable steps, and open up our willingness to allow for some discomfort. Willingness is a mindfulness skill that will help you so much in your anxiety recovery. I talk about it a lot here on Your Anxiety Toolkit because it is crucial for the management of anxiety. The more we're willing to lean in and be open and release the tension we hold of feeling discomfort, the more we get to embrace that discomfort and overcome that discomfort, and in many cases, recover from anxiety. So willingness is going to be so important when it comes to that discomfort that we feel of doing the hard, scary thing. The third reason we procrastinate is perfectionism. Perfectionism is so similar to that first fear of failure that we talked about at the beginning of the video. Perfectionism is all through our society, being told that we have to be perfect, that we have to do it perfectly, that we can't make those mistakes. And what I want to offer to you here is, if you're someone who struggles with perfectionism, again, we want to adopt the B minus mentality. We want to adopt kindness. We also want to pause and acknowledge how our society has created this. Because the truth is, human beings are inherently imperfect. It is impossible to be perfect, and yet we're striving for it. We're so committed to it as if it's actually a reality, and it's not. We won't be perfect. Even if you achieve a perfect score on a test, you're still 3 minutes later going to have to look in the eye imperfection. We're going to have to see the other things we're not perfect at. And it's important to see that if your goal is perfection, you're chaining yourself to having consistent anxiety. When I was suffering from an eating disorder, I was constantly going for perfection with my body, with my diet, with my exercise. And how that kept me stuck is even when I did get to this quote unquote perfect goal, Then I had anxiety about maintaining the perfect goal. So even once I achieved it, anxiety was still there. Anxiety was still running the show, and I was in panic mode all the time, either trying to be perfect or fearing I'll lose this idea of perfection, which I never had anyway. But again, it's all like a construct in our brain that keeps us stuck and keeps us anxious. So it's important to understand how that impacts us and the fact that we will never be perfect. Thank God. I love imperfect people. In fact, I find it really hard to be friends with these close to perfect people. I don't relate to them. I don't feel safe with them. I actually sometimes feel uncomfortable around them. I love, and you probably feel the same way, I feel so much better when I'm with real people who are comfortable or willing to admit their imperfections, are willing to share their imperfections, and we can connect with our humanness together when we settle into that imperfection. So the fourth reason that we procrastinate is feelings of overwhelm. If you're someone who has anxiety, yes, overwhelm is a thing. I think of overwhelm like, there's like papers and things and phones and all these things like just swirling around in my head. And all I want in that moment is just a moment of peace, inner peace and outer peace, where I want everything to slow down, everything to stop, so I can catch up in my mind. However, that's probably not going to happen. When we have a deadline, when we have something we have to do, often there's no physical way to get everything clear. The only thing that I have found to be helpful with this is just to sit down and simply write out the steps I need to do and how I'm going to do it. That is the only thing. But at the end of the day, similar to the discomforts, that reason too, a lot of the work we have to do with overwhelm is be willing to feel it, be willing to slow down, be willing to identify catastrophization. When we catastrophize, we actually increase our feelings of overwhelm. And that's a cognitive error that we engage in. So if you're someone who catastrophizes a lot, you're probably going to feel overwhelmed a lot. That's just the way that it goes, unfortunately. And so what we want to do is try to create a system when you do have something to do where you can break it down into small steps. As I said, I'm a visual person, so I like to visually draw it, write circles around it, put number ones and number twos. I like steps. As you know, probably following me here on Your Anxiety Toolkit, I like a step-by-step process. I like, 5 reasons for this so I can kind of comprehend it in my mind. And so if you're someone who needs that, lean into that and use that to help you create small baby steps. Another thing to do here is to breathe. When we're overwhelmed, we often stop breathing. When we're overwhelmed, we often clench and hold all this tension in our brain and our body. And so our main goal here is to slow it down. You're still going to be uncomfortable. You're still going to be anxious. You still will be overwhelmed. But can you reduce the problematic response to that? Remember, we can't control our experience and how it shows up, but we can control how we respond to it. We can control how we react to it. So we don't want to clench as much as we can. And again, we're going to move slowly into the activity gently over time. Set some time limits. Maybe you do it for 10 minutes. There are so many Pomodoro apps that you can set a timer for 3 minutes and say, I'm just going to do this for 3 minutes. Then I'm going to take a break, do some breathing, but you're moving in small baby steps. The fifth reason we procrastinate is lack of motivation. If you're someone who suffers with depression, or you're just not very motivated today, that's another reason it's difficult to launch yourself into something. Now, a really important tool to remember when it comes to motivation is often we rely on motivation to get us started. And that's fine. That's actually helpful if we have it. However, we want to flip the script on motivation. Often, and I've talked about this on the podcast before, if you have a lack of motivation, the only thing that's going to generate motivation is to get moving. And I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking like, yeah, but if I had motivation, I could get going. So I just need motivation to get going. But I'm here to say no. You actually sometimes just need to, again, go back on creating small baby steps. And once you do get started, you start to have positive feelings about yourself. You start to have positive feelings about what you've generated. And that is what generates motivation. So again, small baby steps, very encouraging mindset, right? As I've talked about in recent episodes, really try to be your inner bestie. Right? Encourage yourself. You've got this. You can do it. I believe in you. Just a little more. Just get started. I know you can. You'll feel so much better when you do. Just keep talking to yourself and coaching yourself and embracing yourself with that motivational best friend voice that encourages you. That can be very beneficial as you're doing this daunting thing that you really don't want to do. Lastly, the sixth reason we procrastinate is poor time management. This is probably one of the most important, especially if you have something that is a deadline. If you don't have time management and you aren't good at really understanding how long the activity is going to take, you're probably going to procrastinate and miss the deadline. We talk all about this in our online course called Time Management for Optimum Mental Health. We actually sit down and step by step plan your day, not really compulsively, but what we do, and I'll give you some tips here, is we actually plan pleasure first. That's the first thing we put on the schedule. One of the main reasons that people procrastinate is we want pleasure. We want to feel good. We want to have great, fun things in our life. And so we spend a lot of time going back and forward. Well, I have to do this assignment, but I want to relax, but I have to do this. And because we haven't planned our time and scheduled pleasure, we end up negotiating and spending a lot of our time going back and forward and back and forward and back and forward. You plan and schedule your pleasure first so that you know you've given yourself what you need, and then you're so much more likely to do the hard thing because you've already promised yourself and followed through that you would do the pleasurable thing so that you can get that harder thing done. In addition, you might want to be someone who schedules pleasure hard, pleasure hard, pleasure hard, and give yourself lots of breaks where you have lots of pleasure and things that bring you fulfillment and joy as you do this hard thing. I often do this with household chores, right? So as I'm doing the hard thing, I'm listening to a podcast that I like. I've planned that ahead. I know that there's a podcast that, let's say, comes out on Friday, Your Anxiety Toolkit maybe. And so I go, okay, on Saturday morning, when I know I have to do the laundry and fold the laundry, which I hate doing and I often procrastinate with, and it sits in the laundry basket for so long that I have to basically go through and iron all of the items. Instead, I go, okay, Saturday morning, when I want to listen to that podcast, I'm going to marry the positive and that difficult together. Okay. So time management is so important. If you're interested in taking the time management course, it is such a deal. It is so reasonably priced for something that will help you just run your week and your day much easier. You can go to CBT School or click the link in the show notes to get access to that course. Okay, those are the 6 reasons we procrastinate. I hope that has helped you identify where you're getting into trouble so that you can make changes and get your life going so that you don't have to panic. You don't have to be stuck in that absolute last minute frantic panic. You can just schedule your time, break it into small steps, be as gentle and as kind and motivating and encouraging as you can, and get the things you want done so that you can go and live your life. Now, don't forget, I always say, today is a beautiful day to do hard things. And so I want you to remember that none of this is easy. None of this is easy breezy. I never want to make it sound like it's easy breezy. It's hard work, but it's important that we remind ourselves hard work is a part of being a human. It is a beautiful day to do hard things. I don't want you to buy into society's idea that life should be easy and this should be easy for you. What's wrong with you? Nothing's wrong with you. It's hard. No one wants to do hard things, but you can do those hard things. So I hope you have a wonderful day. I'll see you in the next episode.